Hello everyone. Right, I thought I'd do this video today on viruses, the germ theory, terrain theory, disease and toxemia. I said I would do it a while ago, but a few other things come up and I've just come back from my holiday, which was lovely. I wish I was still there. I got my book today just in case I go off because I wanted to do viruses first. So, and then follow on into the vaccines, but they are kind of, well, they are very much connected to each other. So I will mention them a little bit. But, I have to say, firstly, I've been researching vaccines for 10 years. And it's only within the last year, that I've realised that certain things were incorrect. And not from the ingredients are hugely toxic, and I'll talk about those and the side effects and everything else. But like I said on my first video, I was still going along with the germ theory in that, Louis Pasteur's germ theory, who was, he was a chemist, he knew nothing about biology. And he basically came up with the germ theory, and that germs or microbes invade the body and they cause damage and make us sick. And this is what has been running the whole pharmaceutical industry, the whole thing, including vaccines. It's all based around this incorrect theory that germs are actually, because germs are everywhere. We're breathing them in, me and you right now, we're breathing them in, thousands of them every single day. Now, if they were the cause of disease, we'd all be sick or dead, wouldn't we? This is the thing, it can't be. Because of that very reason, we would be. And, if it wouldn't matter how strong your immune system was, if it was the germ that was the enemy, it would still invade it. This is the thing with immunity, or your protecting power, your natural protecting power and your natural processes are being massively suppressed and damaged by vaccines and medications and other toxins too. But from a virus point of view, all virologists define that viruses have no metabolic process and that they're biochemically dead. They're not alive. They don't excrete, they don't breathe, they don't exist outside of the body. And because the thing is, we've all been lied to massively. I'm trying to think of a way to do this because it's going to sound unbelievable to some of you. Some of you already know. But, they've done such a good job in lying to us and keeping that lie that, it does seem unbelievable. But, I thought science was when we, new information and new things come along. We actually, we observe and do repeated experiments and come up with the same things. That's what science is. You don't stop in the 1950s and say, no, this is it, this is, vaccines are the saviour to all of infectious disease and this, that and the other, and it's caused havoc. Look around you. The third biggest killer in the Western world is pharmaceuticals, behind cancer and heart disease. Cancer is the biggest killer after accidents in children. Cancer comes directly from the toxicity through the vaccines mostly, and since mass vaccinations began in the early 1900s, this is when cancer rates and everything shot through the roof. There is a massive correlation between them. It's just that and it's documented as well, it's just that we've been hidden from them. It's the same with virology. There are virologists out there who know the truth. They do, and they speak up, but they're the ones that are shot down by the very same people who run these businesses, and they've had their licenses taken off them, or they just call them quacks and they just put them out there as, some fraud or whatever. It's ridiculous. It happens a lot within the medical industry. It really does. And the more you've been looking, the more you'll see it. You've got to have a look at the bigger conflict of interest and who is behind the pharmaceutical industries, and, the organisations that the public are supposed to go to for independent information are all connected. They're all one organisation. The CDC, the NIH, the AMA, which is the biggest mouthpiece for propaganda in America, medical propaganda. They're all one organisation, and their aim is to make you sick, so they can sell you the cure, which actually is what makes you sick. So going back to viruses and virologists knowing the truth, it's just that they get their funding pulled, which is what happened to Dr. Peter Duisberg in the 1990s, who was the virologist who studied HIV, and discovered that it had nothing to do with AIDS. It wasn't, as we were taught. It was a massive, massive scam, and they blamed it on gay men. But all it was a toxic lifestyle, basically, you know, just lots of drugs, and, you know, it was basically a hostile lifestyle, you know, a toxic lifestyle. But because the media jumped on it and scared everybody senseless. I remember when they did the episode, I used to watch the soaps then, where Mark Fowler in EastEnders had HIV, and then he died of AIDS. It was all it's all a lot of pre-programming to do with that, and just propaganda. They're very, it's a powerful tool. And basically, so what they would do, they would run off to the doctors and get their HIV antibody test, which I'll talk about in a minute, and why they're meaningless. And then they would be given the real death sentence, which was AZT. It was the medicine that they gave to HIV patients. And that is what caused all the death. It wasn't, this is why you've got people walking around fine with AIDS now. You know, when they've settled down a bit now, because that one's gone, they're on COVID now, or whatever next one they can blame it on. And they do it through the germ theory, because everyone thinks at the moment that there's an airborne virus, and everyone's acting like lunatics and, you know, putting masks on, taking them off. No, it's absolute insanity. So I think it's important to understand what it is that we assume our sickness is and the symptoms we experience are, because when you understand that from a fundamental, basic point of view, you start to realise what's going on a bigger scale, and we've been lied to from the very beginning. This is nothing new, but, you know, I can't fit everything into a few videos. This is going to need your research as well. You know, you're going to have to put the if you want to know the truth. But yeah, there's patterns of epidemics, and there's a reason for it, because I only recently found this out actually as well. I'll go back to the HIV in a minute. There's a branch in the CDC, within the CDC, and it's called the EIS, the Epidemic Intelligence Service. And basically they come straight out of college and into med school. The CDC pay for them, these people, to go on some course. And basically they send them around to places and universities to pick up little clusters of disease and report it back to the CDC. And then this is how they create these epidemics, through the media. It's basically through the media. Look around you. Can somebody tell me a time that they've watched somebody drop dead from COVID on the street, like they showed us at the beginning with the Chinese? Remember? And that's what brought the initial panic to shut down the world. Do you see anyone like that? Does anyone even know anyone who died of COVID? And that, you know, we know that they're lying on the death certificates as well. Obviously, we've discovered that before, and they're probably still doing it. But these are just propaganda campaigns. But because people don't understand what's going, you know, we've got a big medical cartel, and they are a cartel, and they are feeding all these. They overcomplicate it so much that the average person thinks they just couldn't possibly understand unless they were within the field, which is untrue. You'll realise that if you haven't already when you're researching. But yeah, so back to the HIV. So you've got people walking around today with AIDS. In fact, Dr. Peter Duisberg said on telly I think it was in the 90s, that he would happily drink a glass of infected HIV infected water to show that it has no correlation at all. And obviously they took his funding from him, and other virologists don't want their funding taken from them, so they just toe the party line. But yeah, I mean, AIDS was reclassified. What they do is they come up with all these different diseases, which actually lots of them are attributed to the same collection of symptoms. but they just give it a different name so that they can sell you the cure for each one, when in actuality, so for example, AIDS, which is acquired immune deficiency syndrome, is basically a reclassification of another disease called leukocytopenia, and basically all it is lowered white blood cells, which basically means you're too toxic. That's all it means. The same with polio. Polio is septic spinal meningitis, it's MS, it's lupus, it's parts of flu, it's chronic fatigue syndrome, Guillain-Barré syndrome. They're all the same collection of symptoms, but by giving them all these different names and then being able to sell the cure, this is how they keep their industry working, running, and a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's the second next to child trafficking being the highest. This is the next one. They don't make their money from healthy people. Try to understand that. They only make a living from sick people. So they have to make us scared so that we'll all run to the doctor for all these little things. So I'm just going to say, sorry, I am jumping back and forth. I'm trying to ram it all in, and I'm struggling with it a bit, so I do apologise. Sorry. Going back to the virus thing. So when they're using, electronic microscopes and they're looking at somebody who's sick, what they're actually observing there is the body working with the immune system working to rid the body of toxins. That's all it's doing. And there are different stages of it. So, when we experience a cold, what's happened is the first few lines of defense, which are usually, we're quite versatile. We can deal with a lot of it before, we start to experience symptoms, and a lot of it goes on inside of us and we don't even know about it. But then it gets to a point where it's too toxic, so the immune system kicks in. And obviously it's going to produce symptoms, because what it's doing, the white blood cells and the antibodies, they're engulfing the germs that are only there. The germs are only there to clean up the dead toxic matter that we have put in our bodies, whether it's smoking, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's shit food, whether it's vaccinations, whether it's medications. It's us that have made it, or, environmental toxins, fluoride, chemtrails, all, but basically that is what the body is trying to do. But that's been misinterpreted when they're looking at it under a microscope, that when the white blood cells are engulfing the germs, doing the cleanup process, that is what is the germ that has caused the disease. But it's not it's the toxicity that's caused the disease, because there's only one cause of it, and it is over toxicity. Everything else is a symptom. And what happens is, when we suppress those symptoms, which many people do, even with a cold, you still with medication, it stops that process, that natural process happening in the body. It suppresses it, and then it'll try. But the body wants to get rid of that toxicity, so it tries to it pushes out a different symptom, because it's trying to get out somewhere else. And then you suppress that one, and then you get another symptom because it's trying to push out. And that's what happens. We're actually doing what we shouldn't be doing, and we should be allowing the body to heal on its own. But unfortunately, because most of us are feared to death about it, and we don't understand it, that we just go in blindly on what we're being told. And this applies right across the board. Smallpox, for example. Smallpox is Pasteurs eczema or chickenpox. It's the same thingies, but back then, in the smallpox days, we have to consider other factors which are they know the other factors, by the way, the people at the top, they just leave them out. But let's go back to the beginning of the 1900s, when everybody was living in shit. Literally, there was sewage running down the streets. There was no plumbing. People didn't wash their hands. Poor nutrition, poor sanitation, poor hygiene. It's going to be a toxic soup. So this is why people were ill. Not because something infected them. And then when they did the small, and only 10% of the population was only ever vaccinated, even though the vaccine takes credit like the rest of them do. You have to look pre-1940s, because you have to understand that in medical school, when they're learning from from the medical books, they only give you graphs from like 1940 onwards. Now, there's a very good reason for that from their point of view. When you go back, and we can now, we've got the internet, we can get anything, go back previous, and you will see that 90% of all so-called infectious disease or overtoxicity had declined up to more than 90%. Scarlet fever, there wasn't a vaccine that went out on its own. And then when they brought the vaccines in, woof, everything goes through the roof. And this is what, this is well documented. So smallpox, wasn't it? And polio, everything. So when they were reclassifying, so when they did they did the mass polio vaccines across, and everybody had them. When you go back to the doctors then, they weren't allowed to diagnose polio anymore, even though they were exactly the same symptoms of polio, including paralysis. They called it aseptic meningitis. And this is how the data manipulation works. Statistics, although, they're massively manipulated. Massively manipulated. If you think, doctors underreport vaccine injuries by 90%, then we can't rely on statistics. And when they're being manipulated, and they're very clever at doing it. And how they're doing it is they're scaring you through the media and through the medical cartel themselves, actually, because they know full well. And I'm not, like I said last time, I'm not blanket saying the same for all doctors and all scientists, because that's not the case at all. There is many who know and who speak up and who have been trying to tell us for a long time, but they desperately want to keep hold of this because they know if we understand how our body works properly, they fall flat on their face. They really do, because they are making it worse. You wouldn't believe when all the neurological damage, brain damage, allergies, skin rashes, ear infections, autism, bowel disease, all of these things have skyrocketed since mass vaccination. That's not even denied. Well, it is. It depends where you're looking for your information, but it's absolutely insane. It really is. The virus that they think they're looking at there is not a virus. It's just bits of genetic material that every living organism possesses. Every living organism, which is why a goat and a fruit tested positive for the PCR test, because it's a living organism and they've got bits of genetic material, RNA and DNA, which they are picking up. Even the maker of the test, is it Carrie Mullins or Kerry Mullins? I don't know how you pronounce his name, but even he says they're not for detecting viral material, because they're not for that reason. Apparently, a viral genome has several different parts to it, so there's no way that it can be detected that way anyway. And even whether you're producing symptoms or not, because we've all got nucleic acid all around the body, proteins and things like that, when they're giving you the test, that's all it's pulling up. It's not pulling up any specific COVID. Coronavirus is the common cold. And they stopped calling it that, didn't they? They stopped with coronavirus and they called it COVID-19. And now Darren pointed this out to me yesterday because I hadn't really noticed, but he said, have you noticed what they're doing on the media? They're not calling it those now. They're calling it the deadly virus. That's nothing more than a brainwashing tactic. Look around you. Look around you. If there was a deadly virus, do you honestly think you could go to the pub and you could look around you? How many people do you know? It's just fear. It's just fear. And, unfortunately, when we're going through a detox, right, the old and infirm, ironically as well, through years of probably loads of medication, when they're going through a detox like a flu because they're so toxic, their bodies can't handle it, and that's why they die. It's not a flu coming in and killing them. It's they can't handle the detox and they die, and that's why the immune compromise. And the irony here is they're pushing massively for this vaccine, and it'll be the vaccine that fucks you up. I guarantee it. This is what they've always wanted, and the only reason they want to vaccinate absolutely everyone, and this is why they've always wanted it for everything, is so that it doesn't show up. They can't have healthy people walking around saying, I've had no vaccines and I've been absolutely fine all my life, never been to hospital once, never taken antibiotics, which are dangerous for kids, by the way. And they also, even before the onset of antibiotics, these diseases were on the decline. And that was directly because of better sanitation, better living conditions, better nutrition, better hygiene. That's why. But then vaccines came in and took the credit, and now we've never been so sick. America is probably the sickest, or one of them. The UK isn't much better. You know, we're all sick because we're all eating crap and living a toxic lifestyle. You know, and the thing with this is as well, is that our bodies are really versatile if they haven't been compromised, right? So when you take a vaccine, and when I talk about this next time, and it does, I won't go into detail now, but it does compromise your immune system. It stops your organs working. So where, you know, your kidneys and your liver would excrete heavy metal, the kidneys do, that's the way to get heavy metals out. Well, if you're damaged by a vaccine, they can't do that process, meaning that they hold them in the body and they build up in the body and they lead to the brain and the nervous system. It's absolutely just... it's crazy. It really is. And it stops that process working. But, you know, when we're eating things, as long as the body's working, it does get rid of it. It's just that when you've been damaged by a vaccine and you're not able to do that. So children then, or babies, they can't produce bile properly, you know, when they're newborn. And obviously that's the main, kidneys are the main transporter for bile. And mercury and aluminium are known inhibitors of kidney function. They're known to do it, and they inject your baby the day they're born with a vitamin K shot, and there's like 110 micrograms of aluminium in there. This is too much for... it's like... well, I'll go more into that next time. I will go into that because that's just a bigger one altogether. But yeah, so this idea that which was Louis Pasteur's. It actually wasn't his idea. It was someone before him. But anyway, he coined it, whatever. There was another side, which is obviously the terrain theory, which was V Bechamps' theory. And he knew when, you know, he was looking at, he was testing, he could see that there were other bits in there. There were other things, and they were doing something. Instead of taking a snapshot in time, like, there's the germ, so that's what the disease is and we're going to cure it. He looked at it as a whole, and he called them microzyma, and they were all bits of DNA and RNA, and he observed them absolutely everywhere, whether we were sick or not. So, but this was the bit that was left out, you know, this was the bit that they don't tell you, because if you knew it, if you understood it, then you wouldn't be running to the doctors every 5 minutes and suppressing those symptoms. You know, don't get me wrong, there is in severe cases, in extreme cases, then you probably would need antibiotics or something. But, you know, once your body has got over that cold and flu, as long as it's not being, you know, suppressed, your immune system is then strengthened, and that is how we strengthen the immune system. You know, so childhood diseases are quite okay. They're okay. They strengthen the immune system as long as we leave it do its job. But we're all so much full of fear that we run to the doctors at every point, and we're actually making the situation worse. And it makes sense when you think about it. This is why fasting is a good idea, because your cells have a chance to regenerate. And this is why when you see somebody who stopped smoking, or somebody who's come off medication that they've been on for, you know, a long period of time, they'll be ill, really, really ill, the sickness. That's not something invading them. That's all the years of toxicity trying to get out. That's exactly what it is. You know, your sickness then is actually your cure. And how backward we've got it. And, you know, Bechamps' work can be repeated today. It can be reproduced like real science, but nobody wants to do it, because the minute they start doing it is the minute they get their funding cut. It's a real, you know, a dark web of shit, and it needs, well, it is coming to light. But to, you know, this is why I always wondered with Grace as well, because she only gets like, she doesn't get ill. She hasn't been to the doctor since she was 9 months old, and she's 10 now. You know, she got a strong immune system. I've never taken her. She never doesn't get ill. She gets ill, maybe she might have a cold twice a year, maybe. Just a little cold, and she carries on and whatever, and it's gone. And I'm just, you know, that's her immune system working properly. And this is why, you know, you'd be hard pushed to find cancer in an unvaccinated person. You really would. It is, honestly, it's absolutely crazy. Under this guise of them trying to protect you from some scary microbe outside of you, it's absolute bullshit. It's bullshit. And, you know, the other thing I wanted to say as well about viruses, or about, yeah, Raymond Rife in the 1920s, you probably would have heard of him, maybe not, because he's actually a bit like, he was a fantastic scientist, but again, he was sort of kept out of view, a bit like Nikola Tesla is, you know, they keep the good ones under wraps and just sell you the likes of Thomas Edison and whatever. But yeah, Raymond Rife, he invented the ultraviolet electronic microscope, right, which he used clear crystal quartz, so he could get a big, you know, a view. They could view more, and they went right, and this is when he saw what Bechamps was saying, that all these microzyma and these bits of DNA and RNA are absolutely everywhere. So, and they're doing a job. The bacteria does the job. You know, we have good bacteria which actually cleans up the process of the filth that we've left there. And, you know, sometimes it calls on others because it can't quite do it alone, and they can change shape. And what he was viewing was they can change shape, pleomorphism, and they change size depending on their environment, whether it's in a hostile environment or you know, a clean environment. They will change. That's how amazing they are. And this information is being kept from us to feed us the germ theory crap, because it is crap. What was I going to say? Oh, I got a mind blank. Raymond Rife. Oh, yeah, that was it. Which fits in to when I was researching, like, the power of the placebo and the power of the mind. And I was researching a guy, Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's absolutely fantastic. It was a few years ago. Well, he was a developmental biologist, he was, and he worked in a university. He was a university lecturer. You know, when he was obviously teaching his students what he learned for his degree. And when he was doing his own experiments, he realised that what he was teaching was wrong. And what he did, he was one of the first scientists to clone stem cells. And anyway, him and his team, they did an experiment, controlled experiment. So there was, you know, obviously 2 petri dishes, same cells split into 2. They put one in a good environment or a healthy environment, and they put the other petri dish into a toxic environment, and they viewed what happened. And within a couple of hours, the cells in the petri dish in the toxic environment started to die. So his colleagues said, give him an antibiotic, and he said no, and he took the petri dish and just moved it and put it in the healthy petri dish. And within hours, the cells started to come back to life. They'd stop dying. It's the environment that we live in. This is why we live in a toxic environment. This is why they want to pump you full of vaccines. This is why they want you a pharmaceutical customer from the day you were born to the day you die, because that is how they make their money. And it's all based around the germ theory, which is another really good virologist to look into as well, is Dr. Stefan Lanka, who he won his case to prove for anyone to show him that the measles virus exists, and nobody could, because it's not what we're told is what I mean in terms of a virus. And because they've got us all thinking on these ridiculous lines, and we're all running to the doctors, and we're doing it to ourselves without realizing. That's quite hard for some people. It's quite hard for people to accept. Well, I didn't give myself cancer. Well, what I mean is the lifestyle, and because we haven't been aware of it up to this point, we've been led to believe lies, then, we think it's just a random bit of bad luck. It's absolutely not. And again, like AZT was the damage for the the AIDS patients, what was actually killing them. And then when they died, they would say, oh, the HIV got them and that was it, when it was actually the AZT. It's exactly the same with cancer. And I used to think, me and Darren had this conversation the other day as well. I used to think that cancer was what made your hair fall out. Like when you see the adverts and stuff. And when I was younger, I assumed that is, if you got cancer, that's what would happen to you. But it's the chemo and the radiation that makes your hair fall out, because it's poisoning you. It's trying to poison something out of you. And in fact, the body is that good. Cancer are the late stages of of toxicity. They really are. But even then, even at that point, your body is still trying to work to protect you and keep you pure, because it puts those toxic cancer cells into a tumour. The tumour is saving your life. When you give someone a biopsy and slice the tumour open, the cancer spills around the body, and then all of a sudden you've got cancer everywhere. And cancer can be reversed within weeks as well. And this is one of the biggest stressors, one of the biggest causes of a toxic environment, believe it or not, I should have said this earlier, is stress and trauma. They're the ones that can bring out cancer, because it's your cells talking to each other. They've experienced it, and that's how clever and magnificent and complex our bodies really are. To make it, simplify it, like, oh, that's a germ, we're going to give it some random name and then try and poison it out of you. It just doesn't make any sense, does it? And it really doesn't. And because there were certain things I couldn't answer with it, because I was still going on the germ theory with the vaccines till not that long ago. There were certain things that I couldn't explain, but you can with the terrain theory, and it's just, everything just sort of clicked into place. It really made sense to me. And things like, if there's a germ out there, or a virus, and it's invading you from someone else, from someone coughing or someone sneezing, how come you can have 30 people in a room, you guarantee some of them will be having symptoms, they'll be coughing, you'll see them sneezing, but you don't get it? How come you can sit next to somebody who's got full-blown flu and you don't get it? How can you have 50,000 people in a stadium and guarantee somebody will be ill, but why doesn't everybody else get it? You see? So, it's something to look into, because I believe what we're going through now, at this moment, if you can do your own research and find out that, because this does exist, it really does, it's true, then you will not be scared. You'll have to do some research, because a lot of you now are going to say, oh, she just babbled a load of crap. What about smallpox? What about polio? What about this? What about swine flu? What about that? You have to do your own due diligence to have a look there and see actually what happened, because I can't do it all in one video. But it's there, many of us found it. I didn't just wake up one morning and go, oh, I'm going to piss everyone off and alienate everyone and start making all this stuff up. None of us did that, because there's actual proof for it as well. Masses and masses and masses of it. It's just been hidden from us. But like I say, we're in the age of information. And ignorance is a choice, and you're not going to have that choice very soon, because the powers that be are clamping down massively on any content, like, anything that they would deem controversial or against their agenda, basically. So like I said last time, people have had plenty of time. There's no virus in the air out there attacking you. If you can't see that, there's something wrong. What you're doing is listening to the puppets on the telly talking shit to scare you, because fear is where it's at. Fear is how they control you, and it works a treat. That's why they do it. And we're on an extremely low frequency when we're fearful, and we can be manipulated with anything. And this is why you are seeing people out there with absolutely zero common sense, no logic at all, just blindly following along, It's mental. It really is. And I know there'll be a lot of people out there just complying just for an easy life, but you do realise by doing that where you're taking us, because this is not about a virus. This is about full control, basically. And there are things happening behind the scenes as well. There's so much going on now. It's just all blowing up all over the place. It really, really is. But so in simple terms then, viruses are like soap. They're like an internal soap, and they're cellularly produced as well, and they only come up, they're exosomes, they only come up when they need to help rid the body of all the toxic crap that's built up. That's all it is. Such lies we've been fed, But yeah, so they're like a soap. There's nothing on the outside. You can be injected with one, and I say one, it's not, because it's all. The other thing about vaccines is, they say they put a virus, a weakened or an attenuated virus into the vaccine so that you produce an antibody response, and then if and when you get the dreaded disease again, it'll protect you, which it doesn't anyway. I was under the impression that they did actually put the viruses in there, which was a danger from my point of view anyway. But they don't, because you've never seen a virus in a human or in a test tube, but they know this. It's not viruses they're looking at, it's just little bits of protein and DNA, and that's all it is. But they don't. It's just foreign matter, disease, monkey kidney, and thimerosal, formaldehyde, MSG, polysorbate 20, polysorbate 80, aluminium, antifreeze, neomycin, and various other antibiotics. Human aborted fetal cells. That's all it is. It's just a toxic soup, but there is no virus in there. And funnily enough, there was an article I read last year, and it was a study in Italy, and what they had done is they'd actually got hold of different types of vaccines. I can't remember which ones they were, but they were quite a few, to randomly test what was actually in them. And a lot of all the things I just said have come up, but no viruses were in there. And at the time, because I didn't know then, I hadn't looked at the terrain theory, even though I subconsciously knew about it because of Bruce Lipton, I still hadn't applied it to the vaccine industry. It makes loads more sense now. So I was still looking at it from a different point of view. But now, looking back, of course. So basically, when they're injecting you with a vaccine, they're just poisoning you. That is it. And they are trying to make you a customer of the pharmaceutical industry. And I will go into this in more detail next time. I'll go back historically to smallpox and polio and everything else, and I'll bring that in. But just for the sake of this video, I wanted to try and keep it around viruses, or what we perceive to be viruses, which are not. And in fact, how the absolute opposite is true. And the more you look into this, the more you'll start taking responsibility for, your own health and your children's health. And, it makes me laugh. Well, it doesn't make me laugh. I'm going to have to go to town one day this week because I got to get some bits. And I know what's going to happen. I'm going to walk past McDonald's, right? And they're going to be queuing outside McDonald's with fucking masks on. You have no idea the irony of that. You're going in to feed yourselves on lab-made food, and possibly human in some cases. It's processed, it's made in a lab. That's very toxic to you. Getting fat is your least of your worries by eating that shit. And you've got a mask on to protect you from a non-existent virus, but you're going to go and poison yourself. And then if you get sick, you're going to start blaming somebody else. This is what I mean. This information, if you're willing to look at it, will save your ass and your children's, and you will learn how to detox, and you'll start to trust your body and work with it instead of attacking it. And, you'll become more responsible, and you'll become less ill. You will. And you will get a cold every now and again. You are going to. But I could come up and cough in your face, and it doesn't make a blind bit of difference. You think it does because you've been brainwashed to believe that, but it doesn't. It's very, very clever, really clever, but evil. What I wanted to say as well, You know, just to summarize then, there is only, I said this last time, but just to summarize, there's only one cause of disease, and that's why it's called dis-ease, because the body's out of ease, and it's just toxic. It's toxemia. The body is too toxic in whatever way, and then it tries to get rid of it, and that's the body, that's the sickness, that's the symptoms. We have to experience the symptoms to get rid of the toxins, and it, you know, it does a fine job of it until we interfere. Which is why, you know, vaccines are by far the biggest assault to the body. They really are. They pass all the lines of defense, that, you know, your initial several lines of defenses before it gets into your bloodstream. You know, with a vaccine, it goes directly into the bloodstream, and the proteins that are in vaccines are not in our blood. They're too large and they can't break down, and they rot there. And then the byproducts, then the toxic byproducts that come from that, you know. But like I said, I'll talk about vaccines, I'll talk about side effects, I'll talk about the propaganda, I'll talk about historically about the ingredients, and some stats and some sources and stuff. I'll do that next time. I think that's it today. There is loads I wanted to say, and I bought my book because I knew I would forget, right? My friend got me this for my birthday. It's all lies. It's brilliant. I love it. So there is so much to talk about, but I don't want it to go on. I just wanted to give you, you know, an overview of what, and just to, in points of research, The Poison Needle, that's a good book. The Germ Theory, Goodbye Germ Theory by Dr. William Trubing. Do some research on Dr. Peter Duisberg and the HIV scandal, who was Anthony Fauci was in charge of that, by the way. He was in charge, what was he, the NIAID, the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Disease. He was in charge of that, by the way. Yeah, correct, Fauci. So look at him, Dr. Stefan Lanka as well, who doesn't even refer to himself as a virologist any longer. He's a biologist, but he studied virology for a long, long time. There are a few points of reference. If anyone, Andrew Kaufman, Dr. Andrew, I've seen that he talks about exosomes as well. Any more I think of, I'll tag them below, but they're a good point to start off with, and learn this, because it applies to everything, and you'll feel very empowered. You know, I'm not going to lie, it's taken me a long time. You know, I don't know how long I've been talking for, about 20 minutes. For me, it was easy to understand what was going on here, because I've researched vaccines for such a long time, and because I know what they were historically, and other things like the power of the mind and the placebo, and how our cells actually work. So it was easier from my point of view. So you are going to need to do some research. I hope I've made sense. I probably babbled a load, and there's a load more I wanted to say, but it's going to take me off onto the vaccine thing. I'm not very organised, but yeah, it will give you empowerment to look after yourselves and your children, and to not be misled by an industry that makes money off you being poorly, being sick, you know, and it really does. So just take it into your own hands, basically, is what I'm saying, and learn it, understand it, and you'll soon see how true it is. Because, you know, it was the same thing as what they tried to do with the cannabis oil and cancer. You know, they tried to lie about that, but you've got thousands, and not just cannabis oil, but, you know, an alkaline diet. There's plenty of ways to reverse cancer, unless you get under the industry and they start using their methods of treatment, which is actually just the other way around, like everything else is. But much like they did that, you know, but try to pretend it, but they can't, because there are literally thousands of people worldwide, probably hundreds of thousands now, that were given a death sentence and told that they had, you know, cancer and they only had so long to live, and this, and they didn't want to die, and their will enough to not die was to go and have a look and find another way, find an alternative in a desperate time. And then they come up and all of a sudden they're wandering around today where, you know, the diagnosis from the doctor should have meant they were dead. You can't take that experience away from people, no matter how many times they lie to you, no matter what they say. These people are real. I know some of them. I've helped some of them, you know, and myself. And I just want to say, just quickly, before I go, I've only had flu once, right? And I was 19 and I was living in Scotland at the time. Anyone who sat up like me on a chair, or anyone who's even got out of bed and said they got the flu, is lying. If you've got full-blown flu, you can't lift your head off a pillow. I was like that for about a week, right? Never had it since. When I was 19 and through my teens anyway, I was, I could say, a massive toxic soup. You know, I took loads of drugs. I drank loads. I was a bit of a wreckhead, you know. That no wonder I was so toxic. And funnily enough, I haven't had it since, not even nearly close. I don't drink. I very rarely drink. It's you know, on the odd occasion now. I tend not to, you know, I've helped myself a lot. And a lot of it was my mind as well, by the way. And this is how I realised your mind connection to your illness, to your sicknesses as well. Is so related, and is so important to understand how it works. And then you can get yourselves out of it and keep your children safe, keep yourself safe. But it is going to need your research. I've always said this to people, you know, I can give you some information and give you pointers, and I can scream till I'm blue in the face. The only way you're ever going to know is if you go away and have a look at it yourself. It's that simple. And this is why so many, you're seeing so many conspiracy theories or anti-vaxxers. It's nothing to do with people influence it. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with they've taken it on board. They've gone away and they've looked into what I've said and other people have said, and this ripple effect massively is going out. Not to mention the thousands and thousands and thousands of parents who have vaccine injured children. They know too. And I'm going to talk about that next time as well. You know, how to detox as well, because, you know, there's a lot of information on that. Because once the heavy metals are in the blood, they're really, really, really difficult to get out. And, you know, another classic sign, without going into it too much, is the bowel issues. Vaccine damage, it damages the bowel. And this is why when you change the baby's nappy, it will smell toxic, it will burn them. That's that mercury trying to come out. It's so sad. But it accumulates in the blood, accumulates in the brain and the nervous system, and it causes havoc. But I'll talk about all this in the next one. So anyway, sorry for rabbiting on. I hope I haven't rambled or confused anyone, but I can, if you just want to ask questions, I'll answer it. I hope I haven't gone on too much, but at least giving you a little bit to go on, and go and have a look at research. These people, do your own due diligence, and, you know, see what you think. If you think it's wrong, come back and tell me why. So yeah, I'll leave it there, and next time I will do vaccines in more detail. Yeah, I'll do it like that. All right, thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you soon. Bye.